Welcome to Software Leaders Uncensored with Steve Taplin. Welcome to Software Leaders Uncensored, where tech leaders drop the filter and just tell it like it is. I'm your host, Steve Taplin, a serial technology entrepreneur who's launched 30 companies, failed at 20 of those, but scaled 10 of those to success. And I turned that roller coaster of a ride into my book called Fail Hard, Win Big. And this is where I teach you how to turn failure into your biggest competitive advantage and how custom software played a defining role in every company win I've had. Now I'm the CEO of Sonotify Technology. We're a nearshore software engineering firm helping existing engineering teams scale with our proven talent. And today we have Matt Peters out of Pennsylvania, who has a really good story, who is CTO of a company called CAI. And he has worked there his whole career and rose up the ranks, which isn't as common in this day and age. Matt, welcome to the show.
Thanks very much. It's a pleasure to be here.
If you would, please walk our listeners through the journey of your career. And like all of our parents, you've made them proud, because that's what people... That's what parents in our generation used to say, is you got to go work for one company and work there your whole career. And not many people have done that in the past 20 years.
Yeah, no, it's, I'm really lucky to have been able to do it. I think it's probably, if you asked my wife, she would be inclined to call me a frustrating old soul. Like I did stumble into an organization that, for a variety of reasons, the customer base, the fact that it's privately held, the fact that it was in growth mode when I got here and has continued to be, I had a lot of opportunities to enter into CAI. I actually, to be quite honest, I didn't have a defined job when I started here. I was in higher education working on my advanced degrees, and at the same time I was doing contract work for a couple of the bigger firms that are very well known. And then I was looking for something a little bit more permanent and long term. And when I came to CAI, I went through the organization, interviewed everybody. And when they finally offered me a job, I asked what it was. And the response was, well, what do you think it should be? We're just interested in figuring this out. So I realized not everybody gets to kick off a career in that way, but I got to. So it allowed me to sort of establish myself in more of a research engineering capacity. It was already a technically proficient organization, but it was a way for me to bring a different lens and a different approach to technology for the company. And then I moved through a lot of different roles at CAI. I mean, I've been here for 17 years. This is my 11th job being CTO. So wow. I kind of progressed through not quite junior, but near junior roles up into delivery. I worked in R&D. I worked in back office. I've kind of been all over the organization, all the way up to starting practices, which are basically like new services and delivery arms for the organization. And then VP of IT took over operations and everything else. And then when we kind of came to the conclusion that the next logical thing was, I'd been all over the company, so I had the empathy and appreciation for the perspectives of all the different arms and pockets of the organization. Let's take advantage of that to make strategic decisions for our technology direction and how we future-proof the organization. So that's kind of, I think, why I got to be CTO, not necessarily because I was the ideally qualified candidate, but I did have a weirdly ideal background.
Gotcha. Well, tell us more about CAI.
Yeah, so we're a professional services firm. We're privately held, headquartered in Pennsylvania, but we do work globally. The vast majority of our work, unlike a lot of our peers or competitors, is actually purely domestic U.S. work. So our biggest customers in the CAI portfolio work are really state and local governments. So we provide a wide variety of services that you would expect, like cybersecurity or AI consulting, strategic initiatives, all that kind of stuff. Everything that a big SI would do. But the difference being that we're of an appropriate size, that we have deep skill sets and a large body of folks that we can call on to help get the work done. We're more than 9,000 employees now, on our way to 10, but we take a very bespoke approach to every client that we meet. So when CAI talks about our customers and we measure those relationships, we always talk in years and decades, never months and years. And that's because we meet them where they're at, that we understand what they need, and we don't follow here's our one way to do this kind of an approach. Everybody gets their own version of the CAI methodology, which is great from a customer management and a success standpoint. It's from my seat now, needing to try to make technology decisions across a varying portfolio of work, it presents some really unique challenges. But that's the way that we work and we always have. And as far as I can tell, it's how we always will.
Now, I'm not aware of many technology system integrator companies that are at your size that are still private.
Yeah.
What have been the key drivers behind that?
I think a lot of it is really just that when our founder, Tony Salvaggio, started the company, he had a very entrepreneurial view of what a company should look like and how it should operate. And that really enabled a lot of folks early in the organization to just choose their avenue to help grow the business. And if you were making that kind of a contribution, you got a lot of freedom and leeway to go about it the ways that worked for you. There were obviously always some rules. You need to do right by the customer. You don't get to break any laws, those kind of very sensible things. But beyond that, it really inspired a lot of commitment to the organization. A lot of people have long tenure here, like 17 years. When I say that to most people, it feels like an eternity. Realistically, for CAI's history, I've barely just gotten out of rookie status.
Wow.
And
That
and
says a
now
lot
that
about the company and how they treat their team.
it does. And now that the company is run by Tony's son, Tom, who brings very much that same kind of organizational philosophy to bear, but with a much bigger eye toward it's time to grow, right? Like we've paved the runway. Now it's time for all the planes to take off. And that's really the way that CAI has pivoted and the way that it's evolving right now. But still, a lot of the folks, a lot of my peers, they're people who have been with the company for a very, very long time and moved through a lot of different roles. It's a great way to work when you can get away with it.
No doubt. Well, tell us about some current projects you're working on.
Yeah, we have a lot of stuff going on right now. I mean, for us, it's, we're no different than everyone else. We have to talk about AI all the time because it sounds like you're screwing up if you don't. So that's a big part of the workload for us. But for CAI, it's really we're not building our own models or anything like that. Our emphasis is really around helping organizations responsibly, carefully, and purposefully adopt AI technologies to meet their needs. In a lot of cases, that means we have a big effort underway right now that's really oriented toward infusing AI into a lot of our delivery, which for us is a very hard thing. For a lot of organizations, you can make the single and intentional decision to say, I'm going to pivot. We're going to start using, pick your tool, Claude Code, see how much we can expedite development in that way. And we don't get to do that because our customers set all of those rules. So we're really looking at a much broader methodology that's inclusive of all the technologies that are out there that can come to bear. And really, as I said, we take a bespoke approach to every client, really bringing that lens to all of our AI initiatives. So we're training our organization very broadly on all the foundational elements of AI, and then immediately transitioning into very, very prescriptive training programs tied to a lot of different tools that the client has decided is what's acceptable here, what we're able to use. So we kind of have our own methodologies around how do we figure out what we want to do? How do we actually build out a team? A lot of it has less to do with the technology itself and more to do with the downstream effects of the decision to put AI in the development workflow. And so
So
we're bringing that to all of our clients.
you guys work in the public sector and the commercial sector. Are you seeing public sector, state and local governments getting aggressive with AI, or what are you seeing their desire for integration of that?
I actually am seeing them be very aggressive, and it's kind of shocking to me. And to their credit, this is really the first time in my career that I've seen the government nearly keeping pace with private industry in terms of their motivation and their speed with which they're trying to respond to AI.
Interesting.
Yeah, it has been. And it's been, you can tell when you work with them that it's uncomfortable for a lot of them because what we in private industry think of as normal pace is really fast for them, but they're sticking to it and they're sticking with it, even though it's a new and unique challenge. And it's been a very interesting time recently because there's been less direction explicitly from the federal government than a lot of state and local agencies would normally anticipate. So they've had to invent a lot of their own policies, standards, and procedures, which means that the landscape doesn't have a whole lot of continuity to it. And we're trying to really navigate that all over the country, where even as you go from one state to the next, any two governors' offices have completely different mandates around what's appropriate use of AI, when can you have it, when can't you have it, how do you have to govern it. And we're really trying to help everybody sort of navigate their way through that and understand what are the other accommodations that you need to make in your organization after you're successful with this initial effort that you want, you know, pick a tool, you want you want OpenAI's solution to help you build out code and write test cases and do everything else that lives in the software development lifecycle that we're all excited about. You're going to fundamentally change not necessarily the staff that you have, but the landscape of responsibilities that they have. And trying to be proactive about that and help state and local governments get out in front of that has been really interesting. And I shouldn't be exclusive to them either. Our commercial customers are having the exact same experiences and challenges. Like when you,
Oh, well, everybody's trying to figure it out.
yeah,
That's the reality of it.
yeah, exactly. And when you take those tools and put them in a junior developer's hands, and yeah, you can get a whole lot more output out of that existing team very quickly. All you're doing is really creating some integration and architecture backlogs and bottlenecks further down the line. So we're really looking at it almost organizationally, like we've all gotten so accustomed to that triangle view of the way that an organization would be shaped, and seeing that the outcome of the introduction of AI is really that we need to make it into more of a column, that we need almost as many senior developers and architects as we need junior. We've never really been faced with this problem before. So from a staffing and a longevity standpoint, how do we handle all that? How do we get everyone ready for that? Those are the big items that we're really taking on right now.
So talk about your software engineering team. How many engineers do you guys have? What's your work model? Tell us about that.
There are many answers to that question, so I guess I'll take the more common ones. We're well past 1,000 software engineers in terms of the overall composition of the employee base, just because of the nature of the work that we tend to do. Most of those organizations are allowed to make decisions either in their own interests or based on what the customer is comfortable with respect to how are we structured, how do we deliver work, how do we track it, what kind of methodologies are we going to use. We really cover a lot of ground on that front. The common theme that lives across all of them, regardless of who the client is and what kind of work we're doing, is really, if you're at all familiar with it, the notion of extreme ownership. Jocko Willink's book from a while ago really talks about the notion of empowering your teams, and it works particularly well with software engineering teams, empowering them to make a lot of their own decisions in the moment when they have clarity on acceptable rules of engagement and what the end goal is meant to be, and having them take ownership and responsibility for what those outcomes look like. So we try to instill that philosophy and methodology into the heads of everybody on the team. Then as a result, it matters a whole lot less from a management and an organizational standpoint what tool sets they're using or what methodology they're using. We know what we can count on across the team at any level of the team with respect to extreme ownership and really just understanding that, like, yeah, I've got it, I've got the ball, and it's my job to carry it, even though traditionally we'd always appointed one individual on a software development team, for example, that like, hey, this is your job. You pull this team along with you. We don't really follow that overall philosophy. Everybody's moving together. And that's been a really strong advantage for CAI across the board. It gives us a lot of flexibility, a lot of interoperability across all of our teams. It's been a tremendous advantage to us for several years now since we've really.
And are you guys a remote environment, hybrid, all the
A little bit of
above?
everything. Our common deployment is either remote or hybrid. That's what most of our employees experience. But our general philosophy is just more along the lines of whatever the customer needs is how we're going to do it. So we
Okay.
have big pockets of people who are on site all the time. But I'd say at this point, hybrid is really our common working model. And that, covers the landscape of hybrid methodologies. Some people are a week on, a week off. Some people are 2 days a week, whatever. But we sort of meet whatever the customer's expectation is in that regard.
Now, from an engineering team perspective, before the show, you told me that you have a lot of US-based engineers, but you also have additional support in India and the Philippines as part of
Yes.
your global footprint. How do you make that work from a software engineering perspective with the time zone differences?
Yeah,
What's your
I mean,
secret?
for us, it's really, I'd say there's three principal factors that really go into that. The first one is actually more important than the other two, and it is that we put emphasis on incorporating those folks directly into the team. A lot of clients that I've worked with in the past, other companies that I've been involved with, they really treat a global or an offshore development center as a commodity. I'm just going to throw work over the wall. I expect to get something back from it. And there's a meaningful disconnect there that I think really cripples a team from being able to move forward together. So first and foremost, it is that the folks on that team, they have names. They are people that are a part of your team, and you need to know who they are. And we align partial days to ensure some schedule overlap with them. So everybody, when we do stand-ups, just like anybody else would do, we expect everybody is going to be in those stand-ups, and the days are architected in order to allow for that. Beyond that, it really just comes down to hyper focus and diligence around how we're actually capturing requirements and how we're commenting on things. And the introduction of a lot of AI tools into that process has made it a lot easier for us to coordinate with globally distributed teams. But that really is, I'd say both of those things are really secondary to just the general philosophy that we are all part of the same team. We're all in this together, and everybody needs to understand that from the beginning of the project to the end of it. And we've been very forceful about that across the org for years.
Excellent. So as a CTO, as we're approaching Q4 2025, what are some of the biggest challenges you're facing now?
Right now, I'd say the biggest challenge I'm facing is probably just the evolution of the threat landscape. So for CAI, the office of the CTO is a combination of what's the technology direction for the organization and how do we secure it. So I often talk about CAI as living in the blast zone of all the attacks that happen to state and local governments, local in particular. They're generally viewed as the most significant vulnerability in the US. So there's always an attack happening. And as a vendor to them, we're seen as an ideal way to get in. So we're always under attack too. We know that. And so I'd say the biggest challenge facing me right now is really just with the evolution of AI tools in attackers' hands. We are constantly on our toes, staying ahead of them. Our security posture and positioning has been really strong. We're really proud of the work that we're doing on that front, but it's really one area where even on your best day, there's still more work to do. And we always have to think about it that way. So we've replatformed a lot of our security posture in the last year. We're always retraining that team. We're always looking at ways that we can kind of use the attackers' tools back against them. So generative AI is a big component of the way that we're doing triage and understanding what's coming in, but those models aren't really built for that. So a lot of what we're really working on right now is just how do we build out an appropriate training set on our own, because so few organizations are willing to collaborate on the defensive front. How do we build out a training set that makes those tools actually functional enough that we can rely on them and trust them and treat them as an augmentation of the human team that's doing this work all the time? We're not quite there yet. We're getting there pretty quickly. I'm proud of the work that we're doing, but it's a Herculean effort. Just because every day when we feel like we've gotten somewhere, we find out that the attackers have pivoted the night before, and now we need to react to that. It just never stops.
As a CTO, how do you juggle keeping non-technical executives and board members and investors and people like CFOs aligned with the realities of where AI is and isn't and the efficiencies it can provide?
Yeah, I wish that I could say that this was my term, but it's not. I am borrowing it from Seth Godin. He made the case in one of his recent books that the title of Chief Technology Officer should be rebranded to Chief Teaching Officer. And I completely agree with it. I mean, I think it was not the part of the job that I originally thought would take a lot of time, and I've learned that it actually dominates my time. I'm not hands on keys very much at all anymore, even though I think a lot of people expect me to be. It's not the reality. I spend most of my time really trying to take the time to explain complicated concepts and technologies to folks that really don't understand them and shouldn't. It shouldn't be their responsibility to understand. So for me, and this is actually a philosophy that I've pushed on the entire IT operations group for a long time, I look at it as one of the most important things that we can do and that I can do by example is say no to somebody who wants something new that we know is a bad idea for one of a variety of reasons. The problem that I have seen in a lot of IT organizations is that the conversation stops at no. And my attitude toward all of them and what I try to demonstrate is no is the beginning of the conversation that you have to have with the business. You owe them an explanation. If it's the right answer, then fine. It should be the last choice, right? Like, we're here to help them. We work in one of the only industries and organizations that is purely service oriented. I mean, barring a few pure technology startups, I look at any IT organization as every decision that we make, every tool we deploy, everything we do is really only about making the rest of the business better. It's almost never for us, literally ourselves. So no should be your last resort, but when no is the right answer, now you owe them an explanation and you owe them understanding. And that takes time. And for me, a lot of the time, unfortunately, it's really just repetition that gets us there. I mean, I'm willing to have the same conversation 4 times if that's how long it takes to get a business stakeholder to understand why we can't just deploy the neat thing they just saw at a conference last week that a vendor told them solved all their problems.
Yes.
I need them to know why it doesn't fit in our workflows. It doesn't fit our security model. Like, there's lots of good reasons to say no, but no is the beginning, not the end of the conversation.
I like how you framed it. Chief Teaching Officer.
Yeah.
Very good point. What are some brutal lessons that you've learned that you wish you would have known earlier in your career?
Oh boy. I think a big one that took me too long to learn was, for lack of a better way to say it, you can't always lead by example. That was a leadership style that I responded to really strongly when I was younger, and it was really important to me to carry that forward. And I tried. I tried longer than was reasonable, and I it took me too long to appreciate that that doesn't scale. And if you're leading an organization that is in the process of scaling, you simply can't be hands-on and in the weeds on every project. You need to be willing to trust your team. And it wasn't that I had a team that wasn't trustworthy. My feeling was more like I need to show them my support and that I care about the work that they're doing. And I do that by showing up and being part of it. Well, we're at the point now where we have multiple major deployments in a single weekend. I can't be hands-on with everything. Like, it's insane. And
Yep.
I caught myself really slowing the organization down because I wanted to be involved in everything. And I felt like that was my way of making a meaningful contribution. And it wasn't. It took me too long to appreciate that I was denying other folks in the organization an opportunity to really take ownership of something and really grow professionally. My enthusiastic support was in the way more than it was actually helping. And I needed to be willing to adopt a couple other leadership methods and get out of the way some of the time. I'd say that's probably the biggest one. The other one is really just, it took me a long time to stop second guessing. When I finally got there, I started feeling really good about it. I often tell people that my philosophy would be you cannot regret the journey if you are happy with the destination. And there are often a lot of choices that we make along the way that we look back on and think could have been better. But the reality is we're all better served by just making decisions in the moment when they need to be made. And I've really tried to embrace just doing that more and being reflective of how to make a better decision in the future. But analysis paralysis is a very real thing, and I needed to get out of it. So I really just kind of try to say, all right, I understand the North Star. When I need to jump in and help a team make a decision about which way to go, I don't want to belabor it with overcomplicated analysis. We know what our options are. We know what we're not allowed to do. Now, it shouldn't be as hard as we often make it to make a determination of what's our next best step.
Gotcha. All right, different angle here. You've been building teams for a long time now. What's changed the most from an engineer perspective of what you might have done 10 years ago versus now?
Oh, boy. Yeah, that's a good question. It's
I have
a
a
lot of
couple.
things. Yeah, I'd say that's actually an arena that has almost fundamentally changed in the last 10 years, all the way from the way that we identify a good new candidate. I mean, we used to really emphasize pedigree, and the school that you came from and the GPA that you had made a big difference. Now that's not unimportant, but I'm a whole lot more worried about what's your work ethic and philosophy? What kind of success can you demonstrate? I'm looking more at capability and capacity and aptitude than I ever did before in a new software hire. I used to think if you're bringing in somebody from a top tier school with a great GPA, you can teach them to do pretty much anything that you need them to do. I've found that that's actually not as true as it used to be. And that's exacerbated by the pace of change within technology and the fact that it just continues to increase. So, where we used to look for people who were really methodologically sound, now we're looking for people who are very adaptable, nimble, and comfortable with change. And then I've recently come to the conclusion that we really need to be looking at software engineers in particular for their aptitude to mentor and to teach others in the organization. So that kind of that philosophy that if introducing more tooling into the development process really lets us speed up the introduction of code into the pipeline, now we need to reposition a lot of folks to move downstream from that piece of work and be able to take on workload further down. So it's almost like a mentor-mentee relationship or a master and apprentice kind of a role that we're seeing a lot of software engineering teams shifting towards. So now as I look at what makes a good engineer, what makes a good new hire, that's a big item that I emphasize really strongly now that I didn't used to be very attentive to at all. And I think that might just be that we didn't need as many people in the entire organization that could slide into that role. And the demand is really increasing. So we need to make sure that the supply comes with it.
Well, and the role is definitely shifting and adapting to using tools, to doing things you didn't necessarily have to do. That's kind of the evolution of everything is moving towards. And with AI, you kind of have two choices. You can learn it and master it or be left behind. There's doesn't seem to be any other option in there.
No, I agree. I don't think that there is. And the only unfortunate part of that I see is the percentage of the population that are really stressed out by that fact. Which, I mean, even just, I think it was this morning or it was yesterday that I was reading, it's 41% of Americans feel overwhelmed by trying to keep up with AI and the expectation that they should know how to leverage it in their job. And I can appreciate that, but I can also see that that's not a reason not to keep moving forward. This is coming whether we like it or not, and we all need to get ready for it and get accustomed to that rate of change. It's not going to slow down.
No, it's not. And you either jump on the train or you don't. And I don't know that there's going to be too many roles left that aren't going to count on AI in some way or some part.
No, I used to think that there were a lot of things that were safe, if you will. Safe just meaning no real AI intervention. I don't know how to bet on that anymore. Like there was a part of me that always thought AI is going to be really interesting in healthcare as an example, but what person is going to accept bad medical news from a robot? That's never going to happen. And then I found I was completely wrong. And there was a whole generation behind me that preferred that a person not give them bad news because it makes it more palatable and just not something that I ever anticipated. And if that's true, and if virtual instruction for elementary school can pick up in the ways that it currently is, given that it can adapt to the individual students, kind of feels like it's absolutely going everywhere. So that's definitely the expectation that I'm trying to set for everybody that we're doing any AI work with. It will go, nothing is off limits. It can go everywhere. That's not a reason to do it carelessly or sloppily, but it can go everywhere.
I agree. And Matt, thank you for getting uncensored with us today. Congrats on the way you've been able to navigate through one organization throughout your career and grow and continue to expand into different areas. I know my parents would be proud. Your parents would be proud. And it would be nice to see future generations where that becomes more common, because that has certainly not been the norm over the past 20 years. And I think it's refreshing. Before we wrap, what's some no BS advice you have for today's technical leaders trying to build, scale, or even just survive?
I would say expectation management is key. It's something that I think we're often willing to overlook or assume that someone gets. I think that's a mistake every single time. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how cool whatever it is you're building happens to be. If it doesn't do what someone thought that it should, however they came to that conclusion is not up to you. You still failed. So expectation management reigns supreme in every decision for every technology organization every time.
I love it. Great advice. Thank you, Matt. That's it for this episode of Software Leaders Uncensored. I'm Steve Taplin. If you enjoyed the show, go ahead and hit subscribe. If you didn't enjoy it, well, we're just going to share it with your competitors. Might be the edge they're looking for. Remember to fail hard, win big, and always build what matters. See you next time. That's a wrap. Another great episode of Software Leaders Uncensored. Thank you guys so much for listening. I really appreciate it. It's a lot of fun doing this show. I love talking with great tech leaders. As a side note, if you're interested, check out my new book, Fail Hard, Win Big. This is the story of how I built 30 companies, failed on 20, and turned 10 into multi-million-dollar wins. The common thread with all of them was custom software. Also, if you need software development help out there, my company, Sonatify Technology, We deliver world-class software development engineers out of Latin America. We have a solid track record of helping companies launch better products and faster. Thanks again for listening. Appreciate it and appreciate you.